What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. This is Kaizen Mentality. My name is Robert. Thanks for showing up today. In today's video, I will be going over the book Ultra Learning by Scott Young. Now, this is a fantastic book. It's a book that I've read twice already in the last 3 weeks that I've had this book, and it is really enlightening about the learning process and how we can go about the learning process in a structured, systematic way to improve our learning process. Now, this is so relevant today because the world is changing faster than ever. Automation, AI, technology. Unless you're able to learn skills quickly and develop competency in those skills fast, you, you're not going to be able to keep up with the changes that are happening. And also, if you just enjoy to learn and want to just learn a bunch of different things, this book can be a wonderful resource for guiding your learning process with whatever you want to learn. So let's get right to it. Section number 1, meta learning. Meta learning means thinking about how we learn. Now, this is the first step in the Ultra Learning project. It's much like designing a blueprint of a building. It's drawing up the map of how we're going to go about building the structure, or if we neglect planning how we're going to learn, the process of that, it is very easy to fall into potentially wasting lots of time and effort doing things that aren't going to translate to an effective learning journey. Now, in the book, Scott presents 3 questions to ask ourselves. So that is why, that is what, and that is how. So, why refers to understanding your motivation for why you want to learn what you want to learn. For example, it could be Spanish. So, for me personally, it would be, I want to have conversations. I want to have a basic conversation level of Spanish. Now, or that could be, I want to understand, Spanish television, or I want to give a speech in Spanish. So you need to understand your why. Why do you want to learn what you're learning? Next, what? What refers to the knowledge and the abilities that you need to develop and have in order to be successful. And then third, how refers to the resources, the environment, the method, and the materials that you will need to learn your skill or topic. So thinking about and answering these 3 questions, you can draw up your map of how you're going to go about learning. And now when it comes to planning, as far as planning is concerned, you want to spend about 10% of the total learning time spent on planning. Any more than that, you don't want to do, because at that point you're just procrastinating. Research and planning can easily become a form of procrastination. Principle number 2, focus. Mary Somerville was born to a poor Scottish family in the 18th century. Now, Mary was an accomplished mathematician. She spoke multiple languages. She learned how to paint. She knew how to play the piano. She was a very intellectually bright woman. Now, at the time, women being involved in intellectual pursuits was not common. It was very uncommon. First husband didn't like the idea of women learning. Despite these challenges, in 1835, Mary and a German astronomer, Caroline Herschel, were elected into the Astronomical Society. Now, like I said, Mary had a very keen intellect, but what she possessed to a much larger degree was her ability to focus intensely and deeply. As a child, she was denied a candlelight, and despite that, she would work on her mathematics mentally in her mind. She would focus on doing her mathematics in her head. When she was a mother, when she was breastfeeding, she would devote 1 hour every single morning to studying botany and practicing botany in her garden. So She was a busy woman. She had children. She had duties as a wife, as a, as a mother. And despite that, despite all the distractions, she took advantage of the time she did have. Mary is a shining example of the power and the impactfulness of developing the ability to focus. Now, there are three main struggles that hinder people from locking in their focus. One is failing to start, procrastination. Number two, failing to sustain focus. Now, this is essentially can come from the environment. This could be from your phone ringing. This can be from people bothering you. This could be from even your own thought. Number three, having the right kind of focus. So this essentially comes down to experimenting with environments, with how you focus best. So try out your room. Do you focus better in your room, in your office? Do you focus better at the library? Do you focus better at the coffee shop? This comes down to understanding where you personally focus best. Quick break from the video, everybody. Just want to remind you to hit that subscribe button for more content if you like the video so far. And yeah, don't want to take any more time from the video. Get right back to it. Principle number three, directness. Directness is the idea of doing the thing that you want to get better at, or as close to it as possible. For example, say you want to learn salsa dancing. So, to learn salsa dancing, you're gonna learn it best by actually going out and doing salsa, actually going to a dance class, learning salsa, actually going to a salsa club and doing salsa. Directness, doing that which you want to learn. It seems so obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people will avoid doing the real thing that they want to learn and cop out doing something like reading a book or watching a video rather than actually doing what it is they want to learn. Scott presents a few tactics that we can employ for directness. First is project-based learning. Now, this is essentially organizing your learning for the purpose of developing or to produce something. For example, this could be a speech, this could be a YouTube video, this could be, an art project, whatever you're doing. You have a project that forces you to learn enough to produce something. Next is going to be immersive learning. Now, immersion is the process of immersing yourself in the environment where that skill can be practiced. For example, you want to learn Spanish. This is something that I did. I wanted to improve my Spanish, so I flew to a Spanish speaking country in Peru, and I spent 3 weeks there. And my Spanish went from being not that great to being okay, where I can have a conversation with people on a train for 2 hours. So that is immersion learning, being immersed in the environment where your skill, you have to practice the skill. There's no other way. Number three is overkill approach. Now, this is basically to increase the challenge level where your skills are not enough to handle the situation. Now, this is the most intense approach. I remember as a kid when I was trying to learn how to swim, my dad grabbed me and he threw me into the water. Now, I was not a great swimmer. I can kind of swim. I can kind of kick my legs, but I couldn't really swim that great. So, him throwing me in the water and me having to swim back to the little ledge, I was forced outside of my skill level to adapt and to learn the skill. Now, this one probably employ not as much, but it can be a very powerful technique to employ directness. Principle number four, drill. Now, drilling is the idea of attacking the weakest point of a skill and bringing up that point to a higher level of competency. So, how do you perform drills? I'm gonna bring back the example of salsa dancing just because I have been learning salsa dancing for the last couple months and it's what I know. So, for when you're doing a salsa move, say for example, there's a part of the move which is difficult. Say it's a spin, like you're spinning your partner and it just feels awkward. It feels uncomfortable, like you're not the steps wrong. What you would do, how you would drill that is you would practice just that part of the dance, the turn. You would do that slowly and be very conscious of doing it correctly. So ask the instructor how to do it properly and do it slowly. So you would drill that part 10, 20 times and then bring it all back together, perform the whole move, do the turn, and before you know it, boom, you're doing the turn, you're spinning her, and it's going great. That is essentially the drill and the direct and drill approach, which is practice the skill, identify the weakness, the part which is, rusty, and then practice that, drill that continuously until that is better, reintegrate that back into the whole process, and then boom, you solve that weak point. That is the direct and drill approach. Principle number 5, retrieval. There was a study done on examining students' study strategies. Now, this was an experiment where they conducted, they separated different groups of students after a class. Now, one of the groups, they reviewed the material. They were able to review the material that they just learned. Another group they did concept diagrams. So they did diagrams of what they learned. The other group simply recalled the class from memory. So they used free recall. They had no resource in front of them. They simply recalled from memory. The results were totally inverse. The ones who did the best was the free recall group, the group of students that had no resource, they just recalled from memory. And second best was the concept diagram. And the least effective, were the people that had the information in front of them. They could just review it, but they did the worst. So the question is, why is retrieval so effective for learning? It's effective because the fact that we have to search for the information within our own minds exercises our memory capacity and activates our mind, activates our brain to search for the answer. And when we do find it, it sticks more. It's more of a mental workout, and the brain enjoys that challenge and remembers that. Principle 6, feedback. Long periods of using a skill without receiving feedback can actually lead to the declining of skill. No feedback equals stagnation. Now, ultra learners acquire skills quickly because they seek aggressive feedback, when others settle for practice that provides little feedback or even no feedback. So, why is feedback important? Okay, so feedback is important because it provides us with information that we can use to improve our skills and to improve our performance. A big reason why people avoid feedback is because they take the feedback and they let it affect them personally. They let it affect their ego. They take it as a personal attack. So they would rather avoid that and not get feedback. But this is a big mistake because only through feedback can we improve. Now, there are 3 kinds of feedback. There's outcome feedback, there's informational feedback, and there's corrective feedback. The best form for accelerated learning is going to be corrective feedback, which can really only be provided with a teacher, a mentor, someone there correcting your actions, and that's why it's called corrective feedback. Principle number 7, retention. Forgetting is the default, not the exception. So to become an ultra learner, you have to have strategies to deal with this reality. Scott presents 4 methods that we can use to improve our retention. First is going to be spacing. Now, spacing is the idea of spacing out our learning in many different learning sessions so that it's more effective for learning in the long term. Number two is proceduralization. So procedural knowledge is knowledge that is so ingrained, it's second nature. It's like a part of us. For example, riding a bike is proceduralized knowledge. It's so ingrained, you're not going to forget it. Three is overlearning. Now, this is a strategy to just ensure you don't forget, which is just doing more than you need to do for a skill to ensure that you don't forget that skill. And number four is mnemonics. Mnemonics is a technique for remembering things using visual images. There's the Mind Palace as an example. That's a mnemonic device. Forgetting is an inevitable part of the human condition. But with these four techniques, we can improve our retention and ensure that our memories do not deteriorate. Principle number 8, intuition. Richard Feynman was a Nobel Prize winning physicist. He was an eccentric man. He was a genius. Those who knew him personally considered him a magician. They believed that his mind worked in such miraculous ways, just like not even human. He was like some special kind of person. Now, there's no doubt that Richard Feynman was a brilliant man, but what is often overlooked is his insatiable curiosity and his desire to understand things deeply. He had very, very high standards for what he considered understanding something. So, how do you develop intuition? So, number one is don't give up on hard problems easily. So, this could be when you're faced with a difficult problem, do not quit. Do not quit. Give it another 10 minutes of thought and focus and try to solve that problem. Stick to it. Number two is prove things to understand them. Now, the challenge of thinking you understand something when you really don't is a very common one. The illusion to understanding something is often the barrier to gaining deeper knowledge. It's easy to mislead yourself into thinking you know more than you really do. Three is don't fool yourself. Now, this is a quote from Richard Feynman. Don't fool yourself because you're the easiest person to fool. That's what Richard said. He was very self-critical and aware of his own limiting understanding. Now, there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, the Dunning-Kruger effect occurs when someone who possesses inadequate knowledge believes that they know more about the topic than people who really do. A great method to avoid the Dunning-Kruger effect is to apply the Feynman technique. Now, the Feynman technique, the purpose of it is to develop intuition about the things that you're learning. So, how do you do the technique? Here's the method. Number one, write down the concept or problem you want to understand on a piece of paper or on your computer. Number two, in the space below, explain the idea as if you had to teach it to somebody. So if it's a concept, ask yourself, how would you convey this idea to someone who has never heard of it before? Next, if it's a problem, explain how to solve it. Why the solution that you're telling them makes sense. Three, when you get stuck, meaning your understanding is not good enough to provide a clear answer or explanation, go back to the book, go back to the notes, and review it until you can explain it clearly to somebody. Another important point, ask many questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Like if you don't ask questions, then you're failing to acquire more information and learn more. So don't fall in the trap of not asking questions, because if you do, you're going to be susceptible to the Dunning-Kruger effect, and you don't want that. Principle number 9, experimentation. Vincent van Gogh is considered one of the greatest painters, artists of all time. Recently, one of his paintings sold for $82 million. Now, the crazy thing about Vincent is that he did not start painting until he was in his late 20s. I think he was 27. And another thing is that his drawings when he first started were very bad. People that saw them at the time considered them crude and childlike. And another thing was that Vincent did not get along with his peers. He was a very difficult personality. People didn't like being around him. He often pushed people out of his life. In spite of all of these factors against him, Vincent somehow became one of the greatest artists of all time. How did he do it? The answer was his experimentation, his willingness to experiment. A process that Vincent would repeat throughout his life was that he would find a method, a style, or material, and he would identify that resource, and he would produce hundreds of works in that particular method. And he did that with many methods, many styles. He experimented with everything. And because of this experimentation, because of his willingness to try things, he developed his skills very highly and is now considered one of the greatest painters of all time. In conclusion of this video, I believe our superpower is our ability to learn. No other animal on the planet possesses the learning capacity, learning ability that we have. And by owning that superpower and seeking to develop that, we can achieve whatever we want. We can reach our goals. It's just a question of learning. It's learning about learning and being dedicated to learning as a person, growing as a person. I hope that this video was inspirational, was helpful, was informative and valuable to you. If you enjoyed the video, give it a subscribe, give it a like. My name is Robert. This is Kaizen Mentality. I have more content on the way. If you like these sorts of videos, subscribe and stay tuned for more on the way. Take care, guys.